this is be a picture of the mind, because I don't know how to actually draw a mind or a brain or whatever. So this will be my best interpretation of it. But last night I talked, for those that were there yesterday, I talked about Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. And one of the things that I did with that book, I'm going to give you a study tip on that, because I read the book a while ago, as I mentioned, and I didn't quite get it and understand it. And I had to really read it a couple, 3 times or 4 times actually, I think I'm on now, this summer, and then I'm going through listening to it also on audio. And what I found is by listening to it and reading it at the same time, I have a highlighter out now because I've gone through it so many times. I'm literally like highlighting stuff, and then I go back and really make sure I understand it, because that book and most books, most really good books in our industry are meant and designed for you to study, not to read. It's not for entertainment. It's for you to study. So I've been studying that book as though I'm taking a course, like a college course. And each time I get to a chapter, so like there's a chapter that we're going to talk about today, so it's called auto-suggestion. And in the chapter, he uses the word auto-suggestion. Tony Robbins uses the word, or words, he calls it words. And then other people use it, call it programming, right? So there's a lot of different ways to talk about it. But in that chapter, I got through the chapter and I got it, I understood it kind of in concept, but I didn't understand exactly what to do or how to do it. So what I did was I actually went out and got another book, and here's that book down here, which is What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, which basically is just the author is talking about what do we say, what are our internal thoughts, and how do we control them? Because what I find is that most people, their thoughts are out of control. And the reason why I know that is because I'm most people. My thoughts are, when I started focusing on what my thoughts were, I'm like, oh my God, I'm schizophrenic. Something's wrong with me. I gotta shut up. Like, I couldn't shut up. I kept thinking, so keeping focus, like I've told people, a lot of people say, well, show me exactly what you did over the course of this summer. I'm like, look, I'll show you everything that I did, but I'm telling you right now, it was the most difficult task that I ever had to go through my entire life, because I had to exercise functions that I didn't know existed. I had to build things, learn things. I'm studying, I'm growing. And so it was a really, really interesting summer, but it took a lot of persistence. And that's really something that you're going to want to learn in anything that you do, whether it's this or business or family, wherever, is persistence. If you stick with something and you're focused on it, you'll ultimately get it. And so what I mean by that is this. In the book, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill talks about thoughts, and basically what he talks about is your thoughts ultimately, as time goes on, if your thoughts continue on the same path, which basically is just a term of saying you're focusing on a certain thing, that you'll ultimately get that thing. It'll start to develop in the real world, right? So that's my way of kind of deciphering what it is that he's talking about. So your thoughts ultimately will develop. The problem is when you start really taking note of what your thoughts actually are, and you start realizing what your thoughts are, what you'll find is that most of your thoughts are actually going towards things that are negative, right? So I'll give you an example. I told the story at the last workshop, and I'll see if I can make it a little faster, right? Because I think that was a story, but there's so many good points in it. Earlier, let's say if we went back 4 or 5 months ago, and back basically a year, I had 2 major issues that I was using as an excuse on why I wasn't working out and taking care of myself. One was I was in a car accident, so my back, I had some back problems, and so there was a lot of pain there. And then 2 was I just kept saying that I don't have the time, right? So because I was so busy. And so consequently, being somebody that always worked out, was always in shape, and always ate well, I ultimately put on some pounds and I got a little heavy. And so I decided, because I started thinking about or listening to my thoughts, is every time I would think about the gym, I'm like, yeah, I don't have time today. So I kept telling myself over and over again, out loud and in my head, that I don't have the time. And then every time I thought about even going to the gym, if I had the time, I'm like, man, my back is just killing me today. And the people that were around me know that I would constantly complain about my back. Oh man, my back is, right? So what I had to do is I had to just reprogram my thoughts so that I could take a little bit better control, right? So I studied this and I said, okay, well, this is auto-suggestion for yourself, right? This also works out loud. If you start talking this way to people that are on your team in a positive way, start listening to the words that you say, you'll start finding that, oh man, I was being negative. A lot of people don't realize they're being negative. right? But then ultimately they are. So you can be negative outside or internally. So I was being negative internally, and I was telling myself all the things that I couldn't do, but what I was doing is I was focusing on what I didn't want. Right? So how many times, if you really think about it, if you focus on what you don't want, that ultimately you got it, right? So I'm reading this, and it was like a big, huge epiphany for me. I'm like, all right, well, I know that this works because I know that every time I focus on what I don't want, it comes true, right? So I'm like, okay, so if that's true, and what he suggests is that your thoughts are so powerful and your mind is so powerful that if you literally just change your focus on what it is that you want, ultimately the same thing will happen, right? So I said, okay, well, I have to try this out. But, the funny thing is people are like, well, if it's that easy, I want $1 million. But it's not that simple, right? Because you have to have belief that you're actually going to get it. There's a process. You have to have persistence. So it's not just that this thing is going to magically develop or appear, right? So it's not like I could turn around and say, I want to be healthy. I need to lose 25 pounds. And I command that to happen now. And then I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm still fat. All right, so that didn't work. So I had to figure out a better way to do that. So what I did is I just basically turned my focus from thinking about what I didn't want, I turned it to what do I want? And what I wanted was, I wanted to lose 25 pounds. So basically, I set a goal of losing 25 pounds. I started to visualize because I had some pictures of what I looked like when I felt that I was at my peak. So I started to put those visualizations in my head so I could see that. And then I started to basically just tell myself that instead of, that my back hurt, I use this a lot, is I said, well, how do I, because my back does hurt, so I'm like, I'm going to have to almost lie to myself or trick my subconscious mind. So I basically just walked around, I'm like, man, my back is healing today. Right? So it's just a different way to say it, right? But I'm like, man, my back is healing today. It really feels great. And I'm like, no, in my mind, I'm like, it doesn't. But I kept saying it over and over again, even though I didn't believe it. And then the same thing with, the time thing. I just said, I have a lot of time I can make this happen. I just kept saying, and I put my focus on getting healthy and getting in the gym. Well, here's what happened. Over the course of the summer, I started to actually, I joined a new gym. And when I joined the new gym, it was actually an old gym that I rejoined. I went back in there, and there were a lot of people in there that I knew me when I was in shape. So all of a sudden, I became very self-conscious about where I was, and I'm like, man, if I'm going to come in here, I got to get in shape quick. So I started to tell these guys, almost bragging. I'm like, I know I'm out of shape now, but I've been out of it. You watch where I'm going to be in 2 weeks. So I put myself under pressure to make something happen.